Axel Foley has chased criminals through Detroit back alleys, Beverly Hills mansions, and places where the law only pretends to matter. He has learned that crime wears different faces depending on the neighborhood, but it always follows the same rules. Somebody wants money, somebody wants power, and somebody gets hurt when the joke goes too far. What is not learned, what no cop ever prepares for, is what happens when those rules simply stop applying. When a suspect ducks through an alley and the brick walls melt into painted scenery. When gravity pauses out of courtesy. When bullets bounce, ambuls fall from nowhere, and murder hide behind a rim shot and a laugh track. Toontown does not announce itself as dangerous. It disguises its crimes as gags. And that is exactly why it is lethal. Because in a world where everything looks like a joke, the people being erased don't get taken seriously until they're already gone. If you enjoy stories where comedy masks something darker, where familiar characters are forced to survive in worlds that refuse to play fair, then support the channel by liking the video, sharing it with someone who loves strange crossovers, and subscribing so you don't miss what comes next. Some mysteries only work when the detective refuses to laugh along. Axel Foley had followed worse leads than this. The guy had bolted from a convenience store 2 blocks off Sunset, shoes slapping pavement like he already knew he wasn't getting away clean. Axel clocked the posture instantly. Panic disguised as confidence, the universal body language of someone who thought speed could replace planning. Axel didn't rush. He never did. Chasing was easy. Predicting was the part that kept you alive. The alley narrowed fast. Dumpsters stacked too neatly to be accidental. Axel's nostrils caught the smell of spilled oil and old paint, a strange mix that didn't belong this close to traffic. The suspect glanced back once, eyes wide, then veered left without slowing. Axel smiled to himself, adjusted his jacket, and followed, right up until the brick walls stopped behaving like brick walls. The alley didn't end. It flattened, depth collapsed into color, perspective bending like a cheap mirror. Axel stumbled forward half a step, his boots striking pavement that suddenly felt wrong beneath his weight. Springy, almost polite. The sound echoed strangely, too loud, like someone had cued it. Somewhere above him, a whistle rose and fell, musical and deliberate. Axel froze. The sky wasn't the sky anymore. It was blue in a way only drawings dare to be blue. Smooth and unashamed, with clouds shaped like ideas rather than weather. The brick walls behind him were gone, replaced by painted storefronts that leaned inward as if curious. The suspect was still running, legs a blur, but now his feet kicked up dust that sparkled when it hit the ground. Axel exhaled slowly through his nose. "Okay," he muttered. "That's new." A horn blared behind him, too cheerful, too sharp. Axel turned just in time to see a streetcar bearing down, its face grinning as it rang its bell. He dove sideways out of reflex, hitting the ground hard. The impact knocked the wind out of him, but instead of pain there was a hollow bowing sound, like the ground itself had opinions. The streetcar screeched to a stop inches from his head, wheels spinning uselessly. "Hey, pal, watch where you're standing," the streetcar said, voice bright and annoyed. Axel lay there for half a second longer than necessary, then pushed himself up slowly, eyes locked on the thing that had just talked to him. He dusted off his jacket out of habit. Even as his brain scrambled to catch up, "No," he said quietly. "No. See, that's not how vehicles work." The streetcar blinked, shrugged, and rolled off, bell ringing cheerfully as it went. Axel watched it disappear down a street that curved upward for no reason at all, buildings bending to accommodate the joke. Somewhere, laughter echoed, not from a crowd, but from the city itself, like it approved. Axel's heart rate climbed, not into panic, but into something colder. He had walked into ambushes before. He had been outnumbered, outgunned, outspent. This was different. This wasn't hostile. It was casual, like the environment expected him to keep up. The suspect skidded to a stop near a fire hydrant that immediately grew arms and slapped him across the face. Axel stared, then shook his head once, hard, like that might reset things. "Detroit did not prepare me for this," he said. He moved forward cautiously, senses stretched tight. Every sound felt exaggerated. Footsteps landed with musical timing. A door slammed somewhere and punctuated itself with cymbal crash. The colors were too saturated. The shadows too intentional. Violence, when it happened, was framed like entertainment. A figure stepped out from behind a lamppost, a rabbit in a trench coat, ears pulled low, cigarette dangling from his mouth. Smoke puffed out in perfect rings. "You lost, Flatfoot?" the rabbit asked. Axel looked him up and down. "You're wearing clothes. I gotta assume that means you're the reasonable one around here." The rabbit snorted. "Buddy, there ain't a reasonable bone in this town. Just bits and bits of business." Axel's eyes tracked movement around them. Toons walked past like nothing was wrong, some bending, some stretching, some ignoring gravity entirely. No one screamed. No one ran. This wasn't chaos. It was routine. "What is this place?" Axel asked. The rabbit flicked ash that exploded midair into the shape of a question mark. "Toontown." The words settled heavy in Axel's gut. He had heard stories. Everyone had. Cartoons with lawsuits. Disappearances nobody took seriously. People laughing too hard when things got violent. "And I'm not supposed to be here," Axel said. The rabbit smiled without humor. "Depends." "You funny." Axel glanced back the way he'd come. The alley was gone. In its place stood a mural of a brick wall, painted with loving detail, including a small sign that read "No Exit." He turned back slowly. "I'm a cop," Axel said. "I ask questions." The rabbit grimaced. "Yeah, that's worse." Somewhere nearby, a piano fell from the sky and crushed a mailbox flat. The mailbox popped back up, waved, and kept standing. Axel felt the rules slipping through his fingers. Not breaking. Slipping. This world didn't punish violence. It reset it. Pain was optional. Consequences were selective. But fear? Fear felt real. He could see it in the rabbit's eyes. In the way some Toons flinched when certain names were mentioned. In how the suspect, now cowering behind the sentient hydrant, kept glancing upward like he expected someone to erase him mid-sentence. Axel straightened his jacket again, forced his breathing to slow. "All right," he said. "I'm gonna find my guy. I'm gonna figure out who's messing with who, and then I'm leaving." The rabbit laughed once, sharp and humorless. "Sure you are." Axel met his gaze. "I don't play roles." That, more than anything else, seemed to worry the rabbit. Somewhere in Toontown, a laugh track cut out mid-chuckle. And for the first time since Axel arrived, the city felt like it was paying attention. Axel followed the rabbit down a sidewalk that behaved like it was trying to impress him. Every few steps the pavement changed texture. Smooth like polished stone, then suddenly rough like sandpaper, then springy again, as if the ground couldn't decide what it wanted to be. The rabbit moved as if none of it mattered, coattails fluttering behind him with exaggerated rhythm. Axel kept his pace steady, refusing to speed up just because the world expected a chase scene. "You got a name?" Axel asked. The rabbit glanced sideways, cigarette bobbing. "Name's Benny. Don't ask me why. My mom thought it was cute." Axel nodded, filing it away. "All right, Benny. You said there's business here. What kind of business makes a fire hydrant slap a grown man and then look proud about it?" Benny exhaled smoke that twisted itself into a tiny skull before dissolving. The kind where people think everything's funny until it's not. They passed a storefront selling exploding cigars, joy buzzers, and oversized mallets stacked like produce. The clerk, a duck with thick glasses, gave Axel a bright smile and an uncomfortable stare that lingered just long enough to feel like recognition. "You're a real one," the duck said softly, almost reverently as Axel walked by. Axel stopped. "Excuse me?" The duck's smile snapped back to normal. "I said have a nice day." Axel resumed walking, but the word stayed with him. A real one. Like that meant something here. Like his weight, his rules, his mortality changed the air. Benny turned into a narrow street, where the buildings leaned closer together. Their windows shaped like eyes half littered with gossip. Music drifted from nowhere, a saxophone line, so smooth it felt like it belonged to a different movie. Axel smelled something underneath the paint-bright sweetness of the place. Solvent, ink, and something faintly metallic. Like the underside of the studio, not the surface of the city. "You ever been to Beverly Hills?" Axel asked, mostly to keep his voice steady. Benny snorted. "You kidding?" I've been to places that ain't even drawn yet. Axel's gaze sharpened. That supposed to make sense? Nope, Benny said, but it's true. They rounded a corner and Axel saw a crowd gathered around a bulletin board plastered with posters. Most were colorful and loud, advertising shows, gigs, comedy acts. But one poster stood out because it wasn't trying to be funny. It was monochrome, almost like it had been printed with the wrong ink, and it featured a smiling Toon face with the word missing stamped across it in hard letters that didn't fit the rest of the board. Axel stepped closer. The missing Toon smile looked forced, too wide. The edges of the poster were torn, as if someone had tried to rip it down and failed. People go missing here? Axel asked. Benny's ears dipped. They don't call it missing. They call it written out. Axel felt a chill despite the warm cartoon sunlight. Written out how? Benny hesitated, and for the first time his trench coat swagger cracked. There's ways, he said, and there's people who know the ways. And if you ask about it too loud, you get funny quiet. Funny quiet, Axel repeated. Benny pointed up. Axel followed the gesture and saw a camera mounted high on a building corner. Except it wasn't just a camera. It had a face. A single wide eye staring, unblinking, lens rotating slightly as Axel moved. When Axel stared back, the camera blinked once, slow, almost smug. Axel's jaw tightened. That thing recording us. Recording, Benny said, watching, editing, whatever you want to call it. Just don't give a reason. Axel took a slow breath. He had dealt with surveillance before. Wiretaps, tail cars, suits with earpieces. This felt different. This felt like the city itself had an opinion on what should happen next. They reached a doorway that looked like it had been painted to resemble an entrance, but when Benny pushed it, it opened into a dim room that smelled like damp paper. Inside, the lighting was noir dark, the kind that made every shadow look guilty. Toon sat in booths whispering, their voices low and tense. A jazz trio played softly in the corner, all of them looking like they'd learned to keep their smiles small. A bartender, a dog with vests and tired eyes, leaned forward when Axel entered. No humans, he said. Not angry, just careful. Axel raised both hands slightly. Not here to start trouble. The bartender's gaze flicked to Benny. He'll start it for you. Benny rolled his eyes. Relax. He's with me. The bartender didn't relax. Axel slid into a booth, feeling it would creak under his weight, like it hadn't held anything real in a long time. He looked around at the faces. They weren't scared of him. They were scared of what his presence meant. Like a human walking into Toontown was a sign that the rules were shifting. Benny sat opposite him, cigarette now unlit. You're chasing a guy, Benny said, but you ain't the only one chasing. Axel leaned in. Who else? Benny's eyes darted to the shadowed corner where the camera's angle wouldn't reach. The people who own the jokes, he said. The ones who decide who gets laughs and who gets erased. Axel stared at him, letting the words settle. He'd heard about crooked cops, crooked lawyers, crooked politicians. He'd never heard about someone owning laughter like property. Am I suspect? Axel asked. Benny's mouth tightened. He ain't a suspect. He's bait. Outside, the bright cartoon sunlight suddenly dimmed as a cloud passed overhead, except the cloud was shaped like a clenched fist. Axel felt his instincts flare. So what am I, Benny? Benny looked at him with something like pity. You're the guy who walked into the wrong story. Axel's voice dropped. Then I'm going to rewrite it. Somewhere above them, a laugh track tried to start and failed. The first thing Axel learned was that pain meant nothing here. Until it did. He found out when a Toon at the bar took a bullet to the chest. It happened fast, without build-up, the way real violence always does. 1 second the room was thick with whispers and bad jazz. The next there was a sharp crack and a hole where a heart should have been. The Toon looked down, blinked, and frowned like someone noticing a stain on their shirt. Well, that's inconvenient, the Toon said, before collapsing into a pile of flat paper cutouts. Everyone laughed. Not because it was funny, because laughter was reflex here, a conditioned response as automatic as flinching back home. The pile of paper twitched, reassembled itself with a rubbery snap, and the tune popped back up, brushing imaginary dust from their shoulders. The bullet clinged to the floor, flattened and harmless. Axel didn't laugh. He watched the faces instead. The tunes who laughed too loud. The ones who laughed too fast. The ones who didn't laugh at all and stared into their drinks like they were counting something invisible. That was the real tell. Not who survived, but who remembered. The bartender slid the gun away without comment. No live ammo, he muttered, eyes flicking to Axel. House rule. Axel nodded slowly. So nobody dies. The bartender's ears drooped. That ain't what I said. Benny leaned closer, voice low. Dying's easy here. Staying gon's the trick. Axel's jaw tightened. Back home, death was final. Here it was slapstick. A gag. A reset button. But erasure, that was something else. That was the word everyone avoided. Axel felt in the way conversations shifted when he asked about missing posters, and how the jazz band never played the same tune twice, like repetition itself was dangerous. Outside, Toontown kept smiling. Axel stepped back onto the street with Benny and felt the city's mood snap back into brightness like a switch flipped. A parade marched by, marching bands, dancing animals, confetti cannons firing nonstop. Axel watched the tune get trampled underfoot, flattened like a rug, then peeled themselves off the pavement with a groan and rejoined the parade mid-step. The crowd cheered. Tell me this, Axel said, keeping his eyes forward. If you can't really die, why is everybody scared? Benny didn't answer right away. They passed a storefront with boarded windows. The boards painted to look cheerful, but cracked beneath the paint. A sign above the door read, "Closed for rewrites." Because dying ain't the worst thing, Benny said finally. It's being forgotten. They stopped near a studio lot, the kind with big gates and bigger promises. Axel could feel something wrong in the air here. The colors dulled slightly. The jokes landed slower. Tunes walking past glanced at the gates with a mix of hope and dread. What happens in there? Axel asked. Benny flicked his cigarette at the gate. It bounced, then vanished with a sad little pop. That's where careers go to get fixed. Or ended. Depends how useful you are. Axel took a step closer and felt resistance, like pushing against invisible glass. The gate wasn't locked. It just didn't want him. A security guard stood nearby. A human, not a tune, lean, well-dressed, eyes sharp and humorless. He watched Axel with professional interest, not surprise. That hit harder than anything else so far. You see me? Axel said. The guard smiled thinly. Course I do. Axel smiled back, slower. Then we got a problem. The guard didn't rise to it. He adjusted his tie, glanced at Benny like he was dirt. Humans don't come here by accident. Somebody let you in. Axel's instinct screamed. This wasn't cartoon chaos. This was organized, managed. Somebody had figured out how to exploit a world where consequences reset, but memory didn't. I'm looking for a guy, Axel said. Ran this way. The guard shrugged. A lot of people run this way. And some don't run out, Axel added. The guard's smile didn't change. Occupational hazard. Axel turned away before the conversation could calcify into something worse. The parade music faded behind them, replaced by the low hum of machinery, ink pumps, film reels, things that made stories, not just told them. Benny exhaled. Now you see it. Yeah, Axel said. I see people getting hurt and nobody calling it what it is. Benny snorted. Buddy, pain's free here. Suffering's copyrighted. They passed another poster. Another missing face. This one half scratched out, like someone had tried to erase it by hand and failed. Axel stopped. These tunes, he said. They're being framed. Benny nodded. That's the joke. For what? For crimes they didn't commit. For contracts they didn't sign. For being funny the wrong way. Axel felt the familiar anger rise, controlled but sharp. This wasn't just murder dressed up in slapstick. This was exploitation with a laugh track. People getting erased because they didn't fit a script written by someone else. So where do I fit? Axel asked. Benny looked at him. Really looked. You don't. That's why you're dangerous. The words settled heavy. A siren wailed somewhere. Musical, upbeat, completely wrong. Tunes scattered, not in panic, but in choreography. Axel felt the pressure tighten. The city wasn't just watching him now. It was reacting. And whatever was pulling the strings had noticed that one character on the stage refused to laugh when it was supposed to. The siren didn't sound like danger. It sounded like a cue, a bright, rising wail with a little flourish at the end, the kind of noise that told an audience to lean forward. The street shifted with it. Tunes didn't just move out of the way. They performed out of the way, scattering with spins and pratfalls that looked spontaneous until Axel realized they were too clean, too practiced. Even fear here had choreography. Benny grabbed Axel's sleeve. "Don't stand in the open," he hissed. Axel pulled his arm back instinctively. "I'm not the one that should be hiding." Benny's ears flicked hard. "That's the problem. You think this is like your world." The pressure in the air thickened. Axel felt it in his teeth, like he'd bitten foil. The colors around them brightened to a harsh clarity, as if the city had decided to sharpen itself. The skyline in the distance wobbled, then corrected, like a drawing being adjusted in real time. A patrol rolled into view. It wasn't police. Not exactly. Two Toon officers marched in step, their uniforms immaculate and slightly too large, badges shining with exaggerated sparkle. Between them walked a human, in a crisp suit, clipboard in hand. Posture relaxed in a way that told Axel he wasn't afraid of anything on this street. The human wasn't looking for trouble. He was looking for compliance. The Toon officers smiled at passers-by, tipping their hats, waving like mascots. Axel's skin crawled. The human's eyes found Axel immediately. No hesitation, no confusion, no surprise. Recognition. Mr. Foley. The human called, voice warm as a handshake. "We've been expecting you." Benny's face went pale in a way only a cartoon face could. Overly expressive, but real beneath the exaggeration. He muttered something that sounded like a prayer and slid behind a lamppost. Axel stayed where he was. "You got the wrong guy," Axel said. "That's the line I use." The human chuckled politely, as if they were sharing a joke between professionals. "I assure you we have the right one. It's not every day someone from the real world takes a wrong turn and survives long enough to ask questions." Axel stepped forward half a pace, eyes on the clipboard. "Who are you?" The man tapped the paper once, satisfied with himself. "Call me Mr. Vellum. It's not my legal name, but it's the one that matters here." "Okay, Mr. Stationary," Axel said. "Here's what you're gonna do. You're gonna tell me why tunes are disappearing." Mr. Vellum's smile stayed in place, but his eyes cooled. Disappearing is such an ugly word. We prefer retired. Or revised, sometimes reassigned. Axel's voice dropped. "I saw the posters." "Posters are for the desperate," Vellum said, turning slightly so the clipboard shielded part of his face from the Toon officer's unblinking cheer. "And desperation is bad for ratings." Axel stared at him. "Ratings?" Vellum nodded as if explaining something obvious to a child. Toontown runs on attention, laughter, familiarity. The public loves a face until they don't. Then they want something new, something cleaner, something that doesn't remind them the joke can hurt. Axel's stomach tightened. "So you erased them." The Toon officers laughed on cue, the sound bright and empty. Vellum sighed, as if Axel was being difficult. "We manage them. There's a difference. Every Toon is a product, Mr. Foley. A brand, a property. They sign contracts whether they understand them or not. Some get unruly. Some get complicated. When a brand becomes a liability, you don't kill it. You shelve it." Axel felt the anger sharpen into focus. "They're people." Vellum's eyes flicked to Benny's hiding place, then back to Axel. "They're characters. And characters belong to whoever owns the ink." Benny made a choked sound behind the lamppost. Axel took another step forward, and the Toon officers' smiles widened just a fraction too much. Their hands rested on their holsters, comically oversized, but the way they rested there wasn't funny. Vellum held up a finger, gentle. "Let's not escalate. You're not supposed to be here, but accidents happen. We can make this painless. You go back the way you came. You forget what you saw." Toontown goes back to being a place where jokes don't have consequences. Axel laughed once, short and sharp. Man, you don't know me at all. Vellum's tone remained pleasant. Oh, we do. You improvise. You don't respect authority. You refuse to follow scripts. That's charming in your world. Here, it's disruptive. Axel's eyes narrowed. So that's why the suspect ran here. He was bait. Vellum nodded, satisfied. Correct. Someone who knew you'd chase. Someone who knew you couldn't resist a mystery. Axel glanced around. Toons watched from windows, their smiles frozen. Some looked curious. Others looked terrified. Nobody intervened. Nobody could. Because even if they couldn't die, they could be removed. Written out. Edited until their name didn't exist. Axel felt the weight of it then. Not the weird physics. Not the talking streetcars. The control. A world where violence was harmless, but authority was absolute. Where the threat wasn't pain, but absence. Axel looked Vellum dead in the eye. I'm not leaving. Vellum's smile finally cracked. Just slightly. Then you'll force us to treat you like a problem. Axel's grin turned slow and dangerous. Good. Because I've been treating you like one since you walked up. Above them, that living camera I rotated, focusing tighter, as if zooming in on the moment the scene might turn. Benny whispered from behind the lamppost, voice trembling. Axel, don't. Axel didn't look away from Vellum. I don't do erased, he said. I do arrested. For the first time, Vellum's tone sharpened. This isn't your genre. Axel's voice stayed steady. Yeah, that's why I'm gonna wreck it. The Toon officers reached for their holsters, and the city held its breath, waiting to see what a real man would do when the script demanded he run. Axel didn't reach for his gun, not because he'd forgotten it, and not because he was scared, because pulling a weapon in Toontown felt like agreeing to the bit, like stepping into a rhythm that wasn't his. The Toon officers wanted a scene. Big gestures, big reactions, the kind of chaos that could be cut into something harmless later. Axel stayed still and let the silence stretch long enough to make everyone uncomfortable. Holsters, Axel said, voice low. Now. The Toon officers blinked at him, smiles wobbling like paint on a wall that hadn't dried. Their hands hovered uncertainly, as if they'd never practiced a moment where the target didn't panic. Mr. Vellum watched Axel the way a producer watches an actor forget their lines. Annoyance mixed with calculation. You really think you can command them? Vellum asked. Their union? Axel's eyes stayed on the Toon officers. I'm not talking to your paperwork. One officer, short round, with a grin stretched too wide, pulled a revolver the size of a lunchbox. The barrel was exaggerated, ridiculous, almost a parody of threat. The other followed, drawing a mallet instead of a gun, as if violence was interchangeable here. The crowd of Toons watching from windows didn't gasp. They leaned in expectant. The city loved escalation. Axel took one slow step forward. The revolver's barrel trembled, unsure whether to fire. In Axel's world, a gun pointed at you meant one thing. In this world, it meant a dozen possibilities, most of them designed for laughs. That unpredictability should have been comforting. It wasn't, because the danger wasn't the bullet. The danger was what the scene justified afterward. Your law enforcement. Axel said to the Toon with the revolver, you got a badge. That badge means something, right? The Toon officer's smile twitched. It means I'm funny. Axel nodded once, like he'd expected that answer. No, it means you're responsible. The word landed wrong. It didn't belong in this place. The Toon's eyes flickered, just for a moment, revealing something underneath the grin. Confusion. Maybe even shame. Then the grin snapped back into place, defensive. Vellum stepped in smoothly, reclaiming control with language. This is charming, truly, but you're not going to moralize a city built on punchlines. You can't arrest a contract, Mr. Foley. You can't cuff a company. You can't put Toontown on trial. Axel shifted his gaze to Vellum. I can put you on trial. Vellum's smile returned, sharper now. Not here. Behind Axel, Benny made a small sound like a hiccup swallowed. Axel didn't turn, but he felt Benny's fear crawling up his spine like cold ink. Benny knew something Axel didn't. Not about the mechanics of violence, but about the mechanics of consequence. Vellum lowered his voice, as if offering a deal. You're out of jurisdiction. Your badge doesn't matter. Your rules don't apply. The only reason you're still breathing is because we haven't decided what kind of story you belong in yet. Axel's mouth tightened. I'm not a story. Vellum's eyes slid toward the living camera mounted high above them, then back. Everything is a story here. The camera I rotated, zooming slightly, like it wanted Axel closer, like it wanted his face framed just right. Axel's instinct screamed again. This wasn't just surveillance. This was selection. Somebody, somewhere, was deciding what to do with him based on how interesting he could be made. Axel's voice stayed even. You brought me here to scare me, to make me leave. Vellum spread his hands. We brought you here because you're a complication. Humans complicate things. You don't bounce. You don't reset. You don't forget pain. Which means if you get hurt here, it stops being funny. That's your problem, Axel said. Vellum's smile thinned. It becomes everyone's problem. The Toon officer with the mallet shifted its grip, impatience creeping into its posture. The crowd's laughter started, then faltered when nothing happened. The city didn't like pauses. Pauses made people think. Thinking made jokes dangerous. Axel took a breath and made a decision that felt like stepping onto thin ice. He raised his hands. Not surrender, not performance, just openness. He looked at the Toons in the windows, at the faces that flickered between curiosity and fear, and spoke past Vellum, as if the man wasn't worth addressing. He's not scared of you because you're funny, Axel said. He's scared because you can make him disappear. You can take his name. You can take his face off a wall like it never mattered. A hush settled. Even the jazz drifting from somewhere distant seemed to drop a note. Vellum's eyes hardened. Careful. Axel kept going anyway. That ain't comedy. That's control. The Toon officer with the revolver lowered it an inch without realizing. Benny's head rose behind the lamppost, eyes wide. Vellum's pleasant tone turned flat. All right, he said, almost bored. We tried the polite version. He nodded once. The Toon officers moved. Not to shoot, not to swing the mallet, but to flank Axel, corralling him into a tighter space the way handlers guide an animal toward a cage. Axel realized, too late, that the goal was never to hurt him in front of witnesses. The goal was to move him somewhere the witnesses couldn't see. Somewhere private. Somewhere edits happened. Axel backed one step, then another, feeling the crowd pressing it with their eyes, feeling the camera tightening its focus, feeling Benny's fear spike into desperation. And above it all, Toontown's bright skies seemed to bend subtly, as if the world itself leaned closer to hear what Axel would say next. Axel didn't run. That was the first mistake the city expected him to make, the one it had built an entire rhythm around. Chases were fun. Chases were safe. You could slip on a banana peel, crash through a fruit stand, bounce off a sign, and come up grinning for the next scene. Running would have made Axel predictable. Running would have made him part of the entertainment. So instead, he stepped sideways. Not away, across, right into the gap between the Toon officers, forcing them to react without rehearsal. The one with the lunchbox revolver flinched, pulling the trigger on instinct. A flag popped out of the barrel. Bang. Read the flag in cheerful red letters. The crowd laughed in relief, grateful the world had returned to something familiar. Axel didn't laugh. He grabbed the revolver, twisted it out of the Toon's hand, and slammed it against the wall hard enough to make the painted bricks ripple. The Toon officer blinked, stunned not by pain, but by the fact that Axel treated the weapon like a weapon instead of a prop. Vellum's eyes sharpened. He hadn't expected that kind of refusal. Axel used the moment to move. He shoved past the mallet-wielding officer and grabbed Benny by the coat, yanking him out from behind the lamppost. Move, Axel said. Benny's feet scrambled automatically, more from panic than obedience. Axel, you can't. I can, Axel snapped. I'm doing it. They cut down a side street that didn't exist a second ago, an alley that unfolded like a drawn curtain as they approached. Axel's boots hit the ground with a heavy thud that didn't match the city's sound design, and for a moment the environment seemed to stutter, like it couldn't decide what noise to assign him. Behind them, The patrol didn't chase like cops. It chased like stagehands, closing off exits with props that dropped from nowhere. A stack of crates fell neatly into place, blocking the street behind. A painted wall appeared at the end of the next alley, complete with an artist's signature in the corner. Axel stopped short, eyes narrowing. "You see that?" Benny's voice shook. "They're boxing you in." "No," Axel said, scanning the wall. "They're framing me." He walked right up to the painted barrier and pressed his palm against it. The surface felt tacky, like fresh ink. The wall wasn't real. It was a decision, a line someone had drawn to make the scene go a certain way. Axel stepped back, then turned and ran straight at it. Benny yelped. Axel hit the wall shoulder first. For a fraction of a second it held, the paint stretching like skin. Then it tore with a ripping sound like paper splitting, and Axel burst through into a narrow service corridor lit by cold studio lights. The air here didn't smell like candy-colored streets. It smelled like work, like dust, film, hot wiring, and chemical ink. The walls were bare, unpainted. The floor marked with scuffs from rolling equipment. Axel's heartbeat steadied in a way it hadn't since he arrived. This place obeyed more rules. Not his rules, but rules. Benny stumbled in behind him, eyes wide. You can do that." Axel stared down the corridor. "Apparently I can do a lot of things you guys stopped trying." They moved quickly, footsteps now making honest sounds, echoes bouncing off metal. Behind them, the rip in the painted wall quivered, trying to seal itself. Axel could hear voices outside, cheerful shouts, laughter forcing a threat. "You don't understand," Benny said, panting as they ran. "Back there, on the street, everything's a scene. They can rewrite it. They can rewrite you if they get you alone." Axel kept moving. "How?" Benny swallowed hard. "Contracts. Paperwork. The rules nobody sees. They don't have to kill you. They just change what you are. Change what you're allowed to be." Axel's mouth tightened. "And the missing posters?" Benny's ears dipped. "They get filed, shelved, locked in a vault. Tunes can't die, but they can be discontinued." The word hit Axel like a punch. Discontinued, like a product line, like a joke that stopped selling. They reached a door marked with a sign that read stage access, authorized personnel only. Axel tried the handle. It opened too easily, like someone wanted him to go this way. He paused. Benny grabbed his arm. "Don't." Axel's eyes flicked to the hinges, the lock, the sign. "They're guiding us." Benny's voice cracked. "They're writing you into a trap." Axel stood still long enough to hear his own breathing. The corridor hummed with electricity. Somewhere above, a reel turned, steady and patient. This whole place felt like the underside of a smiling face, mechanical, hidden, and capable of violence without jokes. Axel looked at Benny. "You said I'm dangerous because I don't fit." Benny nodded, terrified. "Yeah." Axel's expression hardened. "Then I'm going to be the wrong kind of dangerous." He pushed the door open. Beyond it was a soundstage the size of a city block, filled with half-built sets. A fake street corner, a painted courthouse, a sunny park that ended abruptly in scaffolding. In the center stood a desk with a single chair, illuminated by a spotlight, so bright it felt like interrogation. And behind that desk sat Mr. Vellum, calm as ever, pen poised over a stack of papers. He smiled like a man who had been waiting for the scene to arrive right on schedule. "Mr. Foley," he said warmly, "welcome behind the curtain." The soundstage felt colder than the streets outside, not in temperature, but in intention. The light was wrong here, too clean, too even, stripping shadows of their ambiguity. Axel took it in with a practiced eye, the way he would any interrogation room. Bare floor, no windows, sets arranged just close enough to suggest reality, just far enough apart to remind you it was all temporary. A city designed to be taken apart and rebuilt overnight. Mr. Vellum didn't rise when Axel entered. He didn't need to. Power like his didn't stand unless it wanted to make a point. He rested his pen against the paper, the sound of the nib scratching a quiet, deliberate rhythm that felt louder than gunfire ever could. "You see," Vellum said pleasantly, "no chaos, no slapstick, just structure. This is where Toontown actually works." Axel didn't answer. He stepped fully onto the stage, feeling the floor beneath his boots solid, honest. This place didn't bounce. It didn't laugh. It held weight. Benny hovered near the doorway, trembling like a character who knew he wasn't supposed to be in this scene. His eyes darted from a half-built courthouse to the fake park to the desk at the center, as if each might suddenly become real and swallow him whole. Axel finally spoke. "You brought me here to show me this." Vellum smiled. "Of course. You're observant. You would have found it eventually. This just saves time." Axel approached the desk slowly, careful not to step into the spotlight. "You think if I see how it works, I'll accept it?" "I think," Vellum replied, tapping the stack of papers, "that once people understand the rules, they stop pretending they can break them." Axel glanced at the paperwork. Contracts, amendments, clauses layered on clauses, the language dense and precise. The kind of documents that decided lives without ever using words like life. "These are ownership agreements," Axel said. "Licensing," Vellum corrected gently. "Much cleaner." "People sign these?" "Toons sign them," Vellum said, which is to say their creators did, or their creators' creators. "Ink has lineage, Mr. Foley. Rights passed down." Axel's jaw tightened, and when a Toon steps out of line, Vellum's pen paused. Then the agreement is enforced. Benny made a small, broken sound. Axel didn't look back, but he felt it settle between his shoulder blades like guilt. "Who enforces it?" Axel asked. Vellum gestured vaguely around the stage. "Everyone. The city, the systems, the audience. Toontown is very democratic that way. If a character stops being funny, stops being useful, stops fitting, the world corrects itself." Axel laughed under his breath. "You're calling that democracy?" "I'm calling it demand," Vellum replied. "People want to be entertained. They want consistency. They don't want to be reminded that the joke can hurt. When a Toon becomes inconvenient, the audience stops laughing. When the audience stops laughing, funding stops. When funding stops, well," he shrugged, "the rest is just paperwork." Axel stepped closer to the desk, close enough now that Vellum had to look up to meet his eyes. "And you?" Vellum's smile returned, untroubled. "I keep the paperwork neat." Axel studied him. There was nothing exaggerated about Vellum. No cartoon physics. No elastic grin. He was painfully real. A man who had found a way to make unreality profitable and safe for people who never had to live inside it. "You erase them," Axel said quietly, "and you call it editing." Vellum's eyes flicked, just once, toward Benny. "They don't vanish. They persist. Archived, stored, preserved. You can't destroy intellectual property, Mr. Foley. You just stop releasing it." Benny squeezed his eyes shut. Axel's voice dropped. "They're still conscious." Vellum hesitated. It was subtle, a fraction of a second too long before he answered. "That depends on the contract." The spotlight hummed faintly, the sound like insects trapped behind glass. Axel felt the weight of the place settle on him now. Not danger, but inevitability. This was a machine designed to keep running no matter who got crushed in its gears. "You're not scared of me," Axel said. Vellum leaned back in his chair. "Why would I be? You're mortal. You don't regenerate. You don't belong here. You're an anomaly that will resolve itself." Axel nodded slowly. "You're right about one thing." "Oh, I don't belong here." Axel reached up and stepped deliberately into the spotlight. The light washed over him, stark and unforgiving. He felt exposed, outlined like a suspect under questioning. Somewhere above, mechanisms shifted. The camera eye, unseen but felt, adjusted its angle. The system was engaging. Vellum's brow creased for the first time. "What are you doing?" Axel met his gaze. "I'm not playing along." Vellum laughed softly. "Everyone plays along." Axel's voice stayed steady. "Not me. I don't stretch. I don't bounce. I don't reset. If you hurt me, it sticks. If you erase me, it's murder." Benny's head snapped up. Axel continued, louder now, projecting past Vellum, past the desk, into the unseen machinery of the place. "You built this world on the idea that nothing matters because everything comes back. But I don't. The light flickered. Vellum rose halfway from his chair, unease breaking through his polish. You're making this difficult. Axel smiled without humor. That's the point. For the first time since he'd arrived in Toontown, Axel felt the system hesitate. Not because it didn't know what to do, but because it knew exactly what it couldn't afford. A real consequence. The spotlight dimmed slightly, as if someone offstage was reconsidering the scene. And in that moment of uncertainty, Axel realized something dangerous. He wasn't just a complication. He was leverage. The hesitation lasted only a breath, but Axel felt it like a shift in pressure, a system pausing to calculate risk. Back home, he had seen that pause in criminals deciding whether a witness was worth the heat. He'd seen it in politicians deciding whether a scandal could be buried. He'd seen it in cops who didn't want to pull the trigger, but didn't want to look weak either. Toontown's machinery had the same pause, the same cold instinct. Mr. Vellum recovered first. He smoothed his tie, recalibrated his smile, and spoke with the calm of a man who believed in paperwork more than morality. You're overstating your importance, he said. You're one person. Axel nodded slowly. And you're one pen. Vellum's smile tightened. This isn't a courtroom. It's a studio. You want justice? That's a genre choice. Axel stepped out of the spotlight, not retreating, but repositioning. He moved like a man refusing blocking marks. You know what my genre is? He asked. I find a guy who thinks he's untouchable, and I touch him. Benny whispered, voice shaking. Axel, stop, I know what he can do. Axel cut in, eyes never leaving Vellum. I also know what he can't. Vellum's pen hovered over the paper. And what's that, detective? Axel tilted his head toward the stacks of contracts. You can't make this clean. Not with me here. You can't turn this into a gag, because if you do and I get hurt, it stops being funny. It becomes a problem you can't edit away. Vellum exhaled slowly, like a man confronted with a stain on a pristine suit. You think the audience cares about you? Axel didn't flinch. Not yet. He turned slightly and called into the empty soundstage, voice carrying. Hey, whoever's watching, you want a show? Here it is. You got a human cop trapped in your cartoon city, and the only people acting scared are the ones who are supposed to be the joke. The overhead lights buzzed, faint and irritated. Somewhere, a reel sped up, then slowed again. Axel could almost feel the unseen eyes narrowing. Vellum's calm cracked at the edges. You're making noise. Noise attracts the wrong kind of attention. Axel smiled. Good. I'm trying to. Benny's ears drooped. The wrong kind of attention is them. Axel glanced at Benny. Who's them? Benny swallowed hard, eyes flicking upward like he expected the ceiling to open. The ones who don't laugh, he whispered. The ones who don't care if it's funny. They care if it's controlled. Vellum snapped, sharp for the first time. Enough. He slammed the pen down. The sound echoed like a gavel. The soundstage responded. The half-built courthouse set behind Axel suddenly brightened, its painted windows glowing, as if someone had switched the scene. The air thickened with that solvent ink smell again, and Axel realized the system wasn't just watching. It was changing the environment to force a narrative. The fake courthouse doors swung open. Inside, it wasn't empty. Rows of toon silhouettes sat like an audience, their faces indistinct, their laughter beginning in a low murmur. At the front, a judge's bench rose, and behind it sat a towering toon figure wearing a powdered wig and a grin too wide to be friendly. The judge banged a gavel that looked like a comically oversized rubber mallet. The laughter swelled. Axel stared. You're putting me on trial. Vellum's voice regained its smoothness, but now it carried threat. We're offering you a resolution, a story ending. You'll be found guilty of trespass, disruption, and endangerment of intellectual property. The sentence will be simple. You will be rewritten as harmless. Axel felt his pulse spike. Not fear, clarity. You can't rewrite me. Vellum's eyes gleamed. You can be made ridiculous. You can be made forgettable. You can be made background. Benny looked like he might collapse. That's what they do to toons who fight back, he whispered. They don't kill them. They make them nobody. Axel clenched his jaw. He'd seen men die for pride. He'd seen others live in humiliation because it kept them breathing. But this wasn't just humiliation. This was identity theft at the level of existence. A living erasure. He stepped toward the courthouse doors, not entering, but facing the judge. "You want to do this?" he called. "You want a trial? Then let's talk about the missing tunes. Let's talk about your contracts. Let's talk about who profits when someone gets shelved." The laughter from inside faltered. The tune silhouettes shifted restlessly. The judge's grin tightened. "Objection!" it shouted, though no one had spoken yet. And the court laughed again, relieved to be told when to react. Axel turned back to Vellum. "That's your system," Axel said quietly. "You tell them when to laugh, when to boo, when to forget." Vellum's jaw flexed. "That's called direction." Axel's eyes hardened. "That's called control." The soundstage lights dimmed around the edges, pulling attention toward the courthouse like a funnel. Axel could feel it trying to force him into the scene, to make him play defendant, to make him small. The city wanted him contained within a script. Axel took a slow breath and did the one thing he'd been avoiding since he arrived. He reached into his jacket and pulled out his badge. The metal looked almost alien under the studio lights. Dull, real, heavy. It didn't sparkle. It didn't pose. He held it up toward the unseen cameras. "I'm Axel Foley," he said, voice steady. "I'm a detective, and I'm telling you, right now, somebody in this town is running a racket that makes people disappear." For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the courthouse set trembled like it hated hearing the truth said plainly. Vellum's smile fell away completely. "Put that away." Axel didn't. "No." Vellum's voice dropped. "Dangerous. You don't understand what you're provoking." Axel's eyes narrowed. "Then show me." Above them, something shifted in the darkness beyond the stage lights. Something heavier than laughter. Something that felt like the absence of humor. And Benny whispered, barely audible, "They're coming." The laughter did not return. That was how Axel knew things had gone wrong in a way even Toontown could not easily fix. The soundstage lights dimmed further, not dramatically, not with flair, but with the quiet efficiency of a system reallocating resources. The painted courthouse flickered, its exaggerated angles losing confidence, lines trembling as if the drawing itself no longer believed in the scene it was trying to enforce. Mr. Vellum stepped back from the desk for the first time, not far, just enough to put distance between himself and the badge still glinting dully in Axel's hand. "This isn't how it's done," Vellum said, voice low now, stripped to polish. "You're contaminating the process." Axel lowered the badge slightly, but didn't put it away. "Funny thing about contamination," he said. "It spreads." Benny pressed himself against the doorway, eyes fixed on the dark beyond the stage lights. Whatever was coming wasn't part of the usual machinery. This wasn't contracts or edits or rewrite rooms. This was escalation without a laugh track to soften it. From the shadows at the far edge of the soundstage, shapes began to move. They weren't tunes. Not exactly. Their outlines were indistinct, like unfinished sketches, figures half erased and never fully redrawn. They moved without exaggeration, without bounce or squash, gliding forward with a smoothness that felt wrong in a place built on spectacle. Where tunes exaggerated emotion, these things had none. Axel felt the hair on his arms rise. Vellum swallowed. "You shouldn't have pushed it this far." Axel's eyes tracked the shapes. "Who are they?" Vellum hesitated, then answered reluctantly. "Quality control." The words settled like ash. The figures stopped just short of the light. Up close, Axel could see their faces, or what remained of them. Smiles scraped away. Eyes reduced to blank ovals. Features blurred by repeated edits, until nothing distinct survived. These weren't monsters. They were leftovers. The remains of tunes who had been processed too thoroughly to return to circulation. Benny's voice cracked. "They're archived." Axel clenched his jaw. "You did this to them." Vellum didn't deny it. They were liabilities. One of the figures stepped forward into the edge of the spotlight. The light didn't bounce off it. It absorbed. The figure's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Instead, the air itself seemed to thin, like someone had turned down the volume on reality. Axel took a half step back, instinct flaring. This wasn't slapstick danger. This wasn't something he could punch or out-talk. This was erasure given form. "You see now," Vellum said quietly. "This is why we manage things carefully. This is what happens when stories break." Axel's heartbeat slowed instead of speeding up. He'd felt this before, not the threat itself, but the moment where fear stopped helping and clarity took over. These things weren't here to punish him. They were here to contain him, to reduce him into something safe. "You think I'm the problem," Axel said, "but I'm just a mirror." The figure in the light tilted its head, movements precise and minimal. It raised an arm and pointed, not at Axel, but at the badge. The badge vibrated slightly in Axel's hand. Vellum's eyes widened. "No, that's not how this works." Axel felt it then, resistance. The badge wasn't magical. It wasn't protected by rules of this world. It was protected by something simpler, meaning the badge stood for accountability, for a system where actions led to consequences that couldn't be edited out of existence. The archive figures hesitated. Benny gasped softly. "They don't know what to do." Axel took a step forward. The light followed him reluctantly, as if forced. "You build a world where nothing hurts," Axel said, voice steady. "So you forgot how to deal with pain that doesn't bounce." One of the figures recoiled slightly, like it had brushed against something sharp. Vellum backed away another step, panic leaking through his composure. "Stop," he said. "This is unsanctioned. You're destabilizing the environment." Axel didn't look at him. "Good." The archive figures began to fade at the edges, outlines wavering as if the system couldn't decide how to categorize them anymore. They weren't funny. They weren't entertaining. They weren't useful. And now they weren't controlled. Axel turned his head just enough to address Vellum. "You thought the joke was that nothing mattered," he said. "Turns out the joke was that you believed it." The lights flickered again, harder this time. The courthouse set collapsed into scaffolding, the painted judge dissolving into loose brushstrokes that slid down the wall and vanished. The machinery overhead whined, strained, trying to reassert order. Benny laughed suddenly, not loud, not happy, but real, a laugh that carried relief and grief at the same time. "They can't finish it," he whispered. "They can't write the ending." Axel looked back at the fading figures, at the torn sets, at the man who thought he owned laughter. "You never planned for someone who wouldn't play," Axel said. Vellum's voice shook. "You don't understand what happens if control collapses." Axel finally met his eyes. "Yeah," he said, "I do. People have to take responsibility." Outside the soundstage, a distant noise rippled through Toontown. Not laughter, not music, but murmurs, unscripted voices, confusion, awareness. The city was waking up. Axel slipped the badge back into his jacket, slow and deliberate. "This isn't over," he said, "but it's not yours anymore." Vellum sank into his chair, like a man watching his life's work lose relevance in real time. Axel turned toward Benny and nodded once. "Let's go." Benny stared at him, stunned. "Where?" Axel glanced toward the exit, where the painted wall still hadn't fully healed. "Somewhere that remembers what consequences are." Behind them, the soundstage continued to unravel, not violently, but honestly, like a lie losing its grip. And for the first time since Axel Foley entered Toontown, the world didn't know how to end the scene. Axel and Benny moved fast, not because the city demanded a chase, but because quiet freedom is fragile in a place built to control pacing. The corridor behind the soundstage had changed. The studio lights that had once been cold and clinical now flickered in uneven pulses, as if the building itself had lost confidence in what it was supposed to be. Painted arrows on the walls pointed in contradictory directions. Doors appeared where there had been blank metal, labeled with names that looked half erased. Revision room, cutting bay, shelf access. Benny grabbed Axel's sleeve again, not to guide him but to anchor himself. "If they get control back," Benny whispered, "they'll rewind this." Axel kept his eyes forward. "Then we don't give them time." They reached an intersection of hallways where the air smelled thicker, like ink left too long in heat. A wide metal door stood ahead, sealed with simple latch that looked almost insulting in its plainness. No smiley face, no exaggerated warning signs, just metal and a small plaque that read archive. Benny stopped dead. "No," he breathed. Axel turned slightly. "That where they keep them." Benny's throat bobbed. "That's where they keep everybody." Axel looked at the latch. Something in him wanted to keep moving, to escape while the system was unstable. That was the instinct of any survivor. Get out while the door is open. But he'd learned a long time ago that escape without closure just guarantees the problem survives you. Vellum had been right about one thing. In Toontown, everything is a story. So Axel decided to aim for the part nobody wanted shown. He pulled the latch. The door opened with a sigh like a reel releasing tension, and the smell hit first. Paper, dust, cold storage, and something faintly electric, like old film still carrying charge. Inside, the archive wasn't shelves in the normal sense. It was a cavernous room stacked with filing cabinets that rose like towers, drawers labeled with dates, episode numbers, show titles, and names that had been scratched out so aggressively the metal was scarred. The lighting here was dim and steady, not dramatic. No spotlight, no music, just quiet, the kind that didn't feel peaceful so much as enforced. Benny stepped in behind Axel, trembling. "Don't," he whispered again, but softer now. Not warning, begging. Axel walked deeper, boots echoing against concrete. He ran his hand along a cabinet and felt the vibration beneath the metal, like something inside was moving, trying to be heard. He opened a drawer. Inside was a stack of paper, storyboards, contract pages, still frames. And between them, a single-cell sheet with a Toon face drawn on it, the eyes wide and terrified. The ink shimmered faintly, alive in a way Axel couldn't explain. Benny made a sound like he'd been punched. That's Lottie," he said, voice cracking. "She used to sing at the Ink and Dagger. They said she moved to a new show." Axel stared at the cell. She didn't move. Benny shook his head, tears welling comically but falling real. "No." Axel's anger returned, but colder now, heavier. This wasn't just exploitation. This was imprisonment disguised as retirement. A world where nobody died, but people could be stored away like spare parts. How do you bring them back? Axel asked. Benny swallowed. "You can't. Not unless the contract lets you. Not unless someone signs off." Axel looked around at the towers of cabinets. "So someone has to choose to remember them." Benny's eyes were red. "Yeah, and nobody does, because it's easier to laugh at something new." Axel felt the weight of that statement settle into his chest. Back home, people disappeared too, buried under paperwork, forgotten by systems that moved on. Toontown had just refined it into an art form. A noise rippled behind them. Not footsteps. A soft dragging sound, like paper sliding across concrete. Axel turned. One of the archive figures from the soundstage stood in the doorway, its outline wavering. It didn't attack. It didn't threaten. It just stood there, as if drawn by the presence of the archive, as if it belonged to this place more than anywhere else. Benny backed up, terrified. "It followed us." Axel's voice stayed steady. "No, it's looking." The figure moved slowly toward the cabinets, head tilted. Axel watched it reach out and touch a drawer label that had been scratched out. The figure's hand trembled, then paused, as if it recognized something without being able to name it. Benny whispered, barely audible, "They were somebody." Axel nodded once. "Yeah." He stepped between Benny and the figure, not as a shield, but as a boundary. "Listen," Axel said, speaking to it like he was shaken witness. "I don't know what they did to you, but I know who did it." The figure's blank eyes fixed on Axel. For a moment, the archive silence deepened as if the room itself waited. Then, faintly, a sound emerged. Not laughter. A whisper of a voice distorted, like a line played from damaged tape. One word, almost impossible to hear. "Name." Axel felt his throat tighten. Benny choked on a sob. "It wants its name back." Axel looked at the cabinets again, at the scratched-out labels, at the cells trapped in drawers like frozen moments. He thought about Vellum calling it licensing, calling it management, calling it neat. And he made another decision. He pulled his badge out again, held it up, not as authority, but as promise. "My name's Axel Foley," he said quietly. "And you're not a product. The figure's outline steadied slightly, like the words gave it something solid to hold. Behind them, somewhere in the studio corridors, alarms began to sound. Not cheerful sirens this time, but a harsh buzzing that didn't belong to any joke. The system was trying to reassert control. Benny grabbed Axel's arm. "We gotta go. Now." Axel stared at the drawers a moment longer, then slammed the cabinet shut, hard enough to echo through the archive. He couldn't save them all. Not tonight. Not alone. But he could do something worse to Vellum than break a scene. He could break the secret. Axel turned toward the exit, voice low and final. "We're taking proof." Benny blinked. "Proof?" Axel reached into the drawer again, grabbed the Celulati, and tucked it carefully inside his jacket, like it was fragile evidence. Because it was. Outside, the alarms grew louder. Toontown was trying to pull the story back into a shape it could control. But Axel had just taken something the system depended on staying hidden. A missing name, and a piece of the truth that didn't bounce.